Hello there, everybody. So, I was made aware of this video this morning. The so-called sensible progressive's opinion on the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Oof, this machine kills fascists. Now, I know this video only has about 650 views, but I kind of want to snipe this one out of the water, like, now. Like, I don't think it's going to catch on, quite frankly. It doesn't seem very popular in the comments. Everybody's kind of, like, making fun of this guy, or they're just saying, like, jokes. So they don't seem to really agree with this guy's opinion. I mean, who would? This is crazy take. But I feel like I need to put in my 2 cents. But first off, I wanted to beg the audience for money, because this guy's begging the audience for money as well. And, recently I got fucked over by a local franchise who hired me, I submitted my work authorization and tax information and everything. They have all of my fucking data, right? But, and they told me I was hired and I was assigned to a particular location, and they didn't inform the fucking manager that I was hired. And the manager never got back to me about what the fuck's going on. So, fuck you. I hate you. Why would you do this? Why would you act like that? Like, seriously. So, if you enjoy my content, I do have a Patreon. I'm making $36 a month already, but if you would like to contribute a little more, I'd always appreciate it. Most of my work focuses on the work of Félix-Deux. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. No. Okay. So I want to give a little bit of background about why I really want to talk about this. So for those who don't know me, right, I have a very interesting relationship with Hiroshima, right? When I was 3 years old, I actually lived in Hiroshima for a year. And you might be wondering, well, why would an American live in Hiroshima for a year, right? Excuse me. Well, that's a very simple question to answer. See, in the 1990s, there was a major crash of the economy in Asia in general, but Japan was particularly hard hit, right? In fact, I have on VHS tapes probably lost media that I can't access right now because I don't have access to a VHS player. If I had access to a VHS player, I'd be able to restore it digitally, but unfortunately I do not have access to a VHS player currently. But I have a lot of footage on there from what it was actually like in Hiroshima in the 1990s. And a lot of that footage contains, in that footage is actually businessmen jumping off of buildings, killing themselves because the economy just tanked, right? These Japanese businessmen essentially lost everything, right? And that was the time that I was over there. And so what happened was Mazda is a Japanese company based in Hiroshima, right? And Mazda was being restructured by Ford at the time, and my dad worked for Ford. He worked specifically in lamp design, so like the headlamps that you see in cars. My dad designed a lot of those. He's a piece of shit. I hate him. But he designed those, right? And as a result of that restructuring, we all lived over there for a year. And, I lived in Japan. And I lived in Hiroshima, Japan, when I was 3 years old, right? And just in case you don't believe me, I have some footage on my channel from Japan. So this is a Japanese cooking show that I did manage to actually get off of a VHS tape. And you can kind of see, like, yeah. And at the end of this video, I believe... Is this the one? I don't think this one actually has footage from me being a kid. But, so we have this video here that we recorded while we were there. And then here's a family video. This is unlisted, so I'm not going to show it, but too much. But this is a video. This is my sister.
For the lunch?
That's me
What else did you
when
do?
I was a little babby.
Oh.
And there's my mother outside of Hiroshima.
A cat lover.
There's my dog from the time.
Okay.
Hello, meeting out.
That's my brother walking the dog
Okay.
in a park. And I remember this park. And here's the final video to show that I definitely lived in Japan at the time. This is my mom talking about making gyoza with one of her Japanese friends, which is kind of just like a kind of dumpling.
That's a good, yeah, or this one.
And then, like, if we scroll to the end of the video, we can see there's me and my sister again.
Good night, Papa and Grandma.
Might cut that part out. But yeah, this
I'm
is...
not going to say goodbye on camera, Mom, because I look like hell. I got a sinus infection, but I'm doing pretty well.
So yeah, that's me as a baby, and that's my sister as a baby. Well, we weren't babies, we were toddlers. But you get my point, right? So the thing is that I lived in Japan, in Hiroshima, Japan, when I was 3 years old. And the thing about that particular age that makes it so sensitive, right, is that if I was much older, I would have been told about what the Americans did to Hiroshima in World War II. But you wouldn't tell a 3-year-old that. But a 3-year-old is also old enough to form their own memories. You know, they don't remember. It's very vague, don't get me wrong. It's kind of like almost like a place that doesn't even exist in my head. But, you know, Hiroshima was kind of almost like the backdrop of my existence, you know, of my experience with existence. So you can imagine that my opinion on the Hiroshima bombings are quite sensitive, because my experience with the Hiroshima bombings is that, you know, most people in the West, they just experience it as, oh yeah, the Americans dropped bombs on Hiroshima, right? And that's a place that I've never even been to. It's a place that's on the other side of the world. It's just not attached to me. And for me, Hiroshima is the place where my earliest memories are, basically. There's a couple of memories that go a little bit further than that, but, you know, and just to kind of lighten the mood a little, I wanted to share a couple of memories that I have from Hiroshima. So, one is I remember when I was in a video game store, and mind you, this is back when we're talking like Game Boy games, right? This is the 90s. And, you know, I was playing, you know, I remember there was a time when we went into the game store and I saw this big, like, plastic, like, figure of Bomberman. It was, like, at least a foot tall. And I was like, brother, can you get that for me? Like, I was begging him to get me the toy, and he couldn't explain to me why it wasn't a toy. Like, I didn't understand that it wasn't a toy, you know. And then another memory is also a toy begging memory, where, like, I'm sure if you've ever played, like, media that represents, like, Tokyo, you're familiar with this style of buildings. But, like, in America, right, we don't usually have multi-story buildings with different shops on them, right? Like, if there is a multi-story building with different shops on it, it's usually like a mall, right? It's not like you walk up the stairs and it's like almost like an apartment complex except for different shops. But that's pretty common in Japan, right? And I remember walking up the stairs to this toy store, and they had a toy trumpet, and I begged my brother to get me the toy trumpet, and he didn't get me the toy trumpet. And my final memory that I want to share with you guys is this is not a mountain, but it's kind of like a hill, and I don't know if it's still there, but there was like a hill where a McDonald's was on the top of it, but it was quite a steep hill, and the hill was right next to a freeway or some kind of major road, right? And, you know, so you would spiral around it to get up to the top, to get to the McDonald's. And my brother and I used to ride our bikes up there, right? And we used to ride our bikes a lot, and it wasn't until eventually I wasn't allowed outside of the building again, because what happened was I got a scrape on my leg, or my ankle, and my idiot abusive mother didn't properly sanitize the wound or anything, so it got infected. And she blames the Japanese on it. I shit you not. She blames Japan on the fact that my foot got infected. Yeah, fucking idiot. And as a result, it didn't heal, so I had to get stitches, and I still have the scar from that, right? So to me, Hiroshima is not just a part of a history book, it's a material reality. So I'm very interested in seeing why this guy believes that a weapon of mass destruction, is justifiable. Alright, so let's see what he has to say.
Hello
Oh,
there.
God.
My name's Card. I'm a long-time progressive community organizer and activist.
Alright.
And here on my YouTube page, I often like to articulate thoughts and opinions of mine that are informed by my politics. I usually stick to talking about more contemporary topics.
Okay, I'm gonna speed this up. This is kind of slow. He's kind of slow talking for me. Sorry, bro. I think that would be okay. Alright.
But talking about the past can still be an instructive exercise sometimes, especially if it might give you a bit of insight into how to approach modern comparable situations. To that end, today I just want to briefly talk about how I, as an ardent lefty, feel about the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the close of the Second World War. I'll say right from the jump that I welcome and invite a spirited discussion here.
Alright, well, you better be ready for what I have to say.
Thoughts about what I've got to say, feel free to sound off in the comment section or in a response video of your own. Today, I will be arguing, from the left, that in my opinion, American and greater Allied intervention in the war was, broadly speaking, good. And
Okay, so, this is a complicated subject. Obviously it's a good thing that the Allied powers, repressed the fascism and imperialist efforts of the Nazis and the Japanese. But I think it's very clear from just a basic level, and mind you, I'm not a World War II historian, okay? I just want to make that very clear. But I think it's very obvious from even just a surface level that it's a lot more complicated than good guys versus bad guys. Because, for one thing, America didn't really seem to give that much of a shit about the Nazis until, they started invading Britain, right? Which is crazy to think about. Like, they literally occupied and took over Paris, right? There's that famous photo of Hitler walking down Paris. And the Americans were like, couldn't care less. Who cares about those Frenchies? Like, that's fucking insane. And that's insane to consider, too, because, our neighbors to the north, Canada, were, sending their troops over to deal with the situation, because back then Canada was still a part of the UK. So the US was just completely isolationist about it, right? And I think it's also worth pointing out that the West, a lot of the Allied companies, right? Like companies that were based in the United States and stuff like that, were actually supporting the Nazis. I actually worked for IBM back in 2016, 2017, the so-called Ginny era, if you know. But back when I worked there, they had a little board that showed the history of the company, right? So they had this board that just kind of showed the development of different things that they invented over time, right? This is a 100-year-old company, so they got a lot to show. And very interestingly, there was nothing between 1933 and 1945. I wonder why. That's because IBM was actually supporting the Nazis, and many companies were supporting the Nazis, right? Now, I don't agree with... I will just give a disclaimer here. I would not treat Guattari as a historian. But I do agree with his analysis in Everybody Wants to Be a Fascist regarding, the Allied powers, that the Allies didn't really see fascism as a threat initially, like, unless they were directly impacted, of course. But, like, America didn't really see the German fascists as a threat until it got to a certain boiling point, right? They didn't see they didn't look at fascism in 1933 and think, that's a problem. I gotta worry about this, right? It wasn't until fascism clearly grew to a problem, to a point where it was actually a threat to the bourgeoisie, that they actually were like, okay, we actually need to do something about this, right? And it was not like a good guy versus bad guy situation, right? And regarding Japan, America literally did not give a single flying fuck about the fact that Japan was terrorizing, Asia at that time, and, doing horrible things and horrible war crimes, right? They just didn't care until the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So don't give me this shit that it was, like, good versus bad guys. Like, it's a lot more complicated than that. Like, you can vaguely argue that the Allies were better than, like, the Axis powers. But, like, I mean, come on, dude. Like, really? And not to mention that the Allies did some pretty horrific things themselves. Like, how Churchill basically caused a famine in India at the time, right? So, like, let's not put the rose-tinted glasses on this situation.
The immense amount of bombing that was done to Japan, including the atomic bombings of Hiroshima...
Oh no, it's this fucking argument. I fucking hate this argument. Oh, we were firebombing, me. Oh my god.
Was, to put it simply, not just in and of itself a good thing to have happened, but...
Wait, what? No, it was not a good thing that happened. That's not remotely a good thing that happened. Like, yeah, of course, like, it was, like, war is not a good thing, okay? There's nothing good about firebombing or fucking nuking a city. There's nothing good about that, right? At the very least, most people tend to argue that was, like, a last resort, because it's not a good thing. Like, what do you mean it's a good thing? Like, that's horrific levels of violence. What are you talking about?
Unambiguously, morally and practically justified. Now, in all my time as a progressive organizer, I've never been one to advocate relying solely on liberal electoralism or appealing to the state to fix all your problems. But I also decidedly don't put any stock in completely utopian thinking.
What?
I think you should always acknowledge the realities of the politics you're living in currently and work towards practical outcomes. To that end, suppose you're a modern lefty sent back in time somehow to the US in the early 40s. I think you would be correct in advocating and supporting America's entry into and involvement in the Second World War. Yes, there is an immense amount of things you could very correctly decry about the American state and its culture in the mid-20th century. No one is saying otherwise. Even after...
I'll be honest with you, I think that's a very complicated question. I don't think it would be, like... I think this is part of the problem with, like, just reducing the analysis to between good and bad. Like I guess it's good because you're, defeating the Nazi power, right? But, like, it's way more complicated than that. Like, there's so many variables. You can't, like, I think saying it's good or bad is just the wrong way to analyze history, in my opinion. Like, that's just wrong.
DR's New Deal. America is still violently repressive of a lot of left-wing types, labor organizers, unionists.
I mean, at that time, they were literally suppressing, a potential socialist, uprising. That's what the New Deal was for. The New Deal was formulated to capture those desires, those repressed desires that were being expressed through this, socialist uprising caused by the Great Depression, and to say, no, we got this. We got this. Don't worry about it. We got this. We know you're concerned. And they recaptured all of that, libidinal energy back into the apparatuses of capital. So, yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that, bro.
One seeking a fairer distribution of resources following the Great Depression and so on. and it's 100 times worse for you if you're non-white and or a woman. That being said, Germany, Italy, Spain, Japan, and their handful of minor allies were all expressly fascist nations, actively starting and waging wars of conquest.
Okay.
And it's good that a lot of other nations work together to stop them militarily, and stop them hard. You can.
Again, I mean, it's kind of reductionist to transform it into this binary flow of good and bad. Like, yeah, of course it's good that they stopped the fascists, but, like, there was a lot more that happened than just that. Like, it was literally, World War II was six years long or whatever, I think, and then, like, the rise of these fascist nations is at least, over a decade. I mean, the Third Reich existed for 12 years. So, what were the Allies doing in that time? Why is it that they didn't go after Hitler as soon as he was elected? And what about the years of oppression that he was doing on his own people? I mean, I don't expect, I don't necessarily expect Allied intelligence to be aware of everything, but I feel like if their concern was suppressing fascism, they would have done it way, way before World War II. Like, I think, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
And I will say that there is a lot to not like about the US and what it was doing back then. There's a lot to not like about the UK and its leadership and its hundreds of years of colonialism. And there's a lot to not like about the Soviet Union and what it had done in its relatively short history at that point too. But it's good they all fought the Axis powers, and I think anyone then would be correct in supporting them doing so. It's good that in Europe, the Allies swept right through the continent from both ends, liberating all the territory that had been occupied by the fascists since the start of the war, rather than accepting any sort of armistice with Germany and co. But that all happening isn't the big moral question people love to debate about how World War II should have been fought. What people are much more likely to be discussing, even to this day, and what I want to touch on directly, myself here, is, was the use of nuclear weapons in the Pacific the right call too?
No. No, it wasn't. And even if it wasn't for the deaths of all of those people, it still wasn't, because, like, the dropping of those bombs led to the Cold War and the extreme tensions between the U.S. and the USSR. And even today, we are still threatened with the threat of nuclear annihilation, thanks to the dropping of the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I swear to God, if you're going to make the argument that the firebombings of Tokyo would have been worse, like, just stop. No. Like, the consequences of the nuclear explosions was way worse than anything that could have been done in comparison. Besides just the mass loss of life and the horrific nature of the bombs, it created a politics that has put life on edge ever since its existence. Like, for fuck's sake, there's a conflict going on right now between India and Pakistan, the two nations in the world that I would trust the least with nuclear weapons, and they have nuclear weapons. Well, maybe that's not true. Not necessarily. I don't really trust Israel either. But, like, these two nations who just are constantly in tension with each other and are constantly fighting over Kashmir and related areas, they have the threat of just annihilating the world with nuclear weapons. And that's the whole reason why the Cold War was so tense, because nuclear weapons could, just the problem of just bombing everything out of existence. Like, life would just kill itself. Like, no, there's nothing good about the fucking nuclear bombs.
And once again, without hesitation, I say yes. When the topic comes up, you often get arguments to the effect of, dropping the bombs avoided risking the lives of the countless Allied servicemen you'd need to invade the Japanese mainland, or, in the long run, the Japanese casualties of the bombs themselves are just a fraction of the total casualties the Japanese population would have suffered under a long-term blockade or an invasion and occupation. So therefore, the bombings, despite their very large cost in human life, actually minimize human death other roads not taken could have caused. And I do believe both those things are true.
Okay, but that's not, I don't even think that's really an argument, though, because it doesn't really take into consequence the historical consequences of it. It's not just a raw numbers game. You know, if nuclear war broke out right now, the sheer numbers of casualties would be way higher than the deaths of the U.S. infantrymen or the Japanese people, by far.
You get people suggesting that perhaps Japan could have been made to surrender if the Allies did a thorough blockade of the home islands once they were in a position to do so. Or maybe Truman could have detonated a nuke offshore or somewhere really rural to demonstrate they had the bombs without hitting a major city. But I, for one, don't bother trying to refute those sorts of arguments myself. And these practical considerations of how best to minimize Japanese casualties don't actually figure into it one way or another, the way I see it, either. I think to justify the nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki best by simply affirming that Japan was in the wrong from the start.
Okay, so let's take this logic to America right now. You know, America has a fascist state right now, right? And does this mean by extension that you would support, say, the nuclear bombing of, like, New York City or, you know, Chicago or San Francisco or Los Angeles or any major city? Like, you know, you're gonna be killing, like, a good number of fascists. I mean, even if 10% of the people in New York City are fascists, like, how many people live in New York City? Let's see. What is the population of New York City? We're looking at, you know, 8 million people, right? So if 10% of those people are fascists, right, you're killing 800,000 fascists. Isn't that good? No. You're killing a bunch of other people too. You're killing a ton of innocent people. You're killing a ton of children. You're killing a ton of people who are in poverty, who have nothing to really do with it. Like, yes, the entire Japanese state was basically mobilized into this hyper-fascist, aggressive, violent culture, but that doesn't mean that, one, there wasn't resistance to those ideas, even if they were repressed and not visible, right? There was definitely, I'm absolutely certain that not 100% of Japanese people necessarily agreed with the imperialism of Japan. There is definitely Japanese leftism going on at that time, right? I'm not a World War II historian, but I'm pretty sure that that's a truth, right? And then, secondly, there's a lot of innocent people who have nothing, that are not even particularly politically involved. Like, what about all the children? You know, if you've ever seen the anime movie Barefoot Gen, right? You literally see the death of almost this kid's entire family, and his friend, like, literally dies after the explosion. He witnesses dozens of people with their skin literally falling off because it's molten off their bodies. Like, very horrific. It's a genuinely traumatizing film because of just how in-depth the horror is. And the fact that, unlike most horror films that we would see today, that's actually something that really happened. Right? Like, that's actually something that happened to real people who died. That's why there's such a fascination with, you know, the deaths of these people, because it's just genuinely horrific what happened. Not every single person that was killed in that was a fascist. Just bottom line. Like, you can't justify just the mass murder of hundreds of thousands of people or whatever just because the country is fascist. That's insane. Like, even like, you know, but yeah, so it's just not justified.
They're bad guys in every possible sense.
Why do you keep reducing it to good and bad guys? That's not a historical way to analyze anything. Like, it's never about good guys and bad guys. This isn't a fucking superhero movie. This is real life. Come on, grow up.
The Japanese Empire had for quite some time been occupying as much of the Pacific and Southeast Asia as they could. They were ethnically cleansing China and Korea. They were an expansionist fascist state.
Okay, so the United States ethnically cleansed the entire fucking North American... tried to ethnically cleanse the entire North American continent of indigenous peoples. Does that mean that we should have nukes dropped on us? Like, does that solve the problem? I mean, let alone the fact that you would be nuking all of the indigenous people that are left. Like, what the fuck? The First Nations people or whatever, they still live here. You know, that's not nuking is not a solution to this problem. What the fuck?
And they sought out war with the US and the British Commonwealth and the rest of the Allied powers too. They were the aggressors.
Okay.
And it's good to hold absolutely nothing back militarily to stop them.
No, not necessarily. You could kill a lot of innocent people. In fact, in cinema, there's a lot of examples of a commander or military fighter, right, who, you know, has to hold back because they're gonna kill an innocent, right? And when you go and kill an innocent, by the way, like, a big part of the reason why in, like, historically you would kill the children in a raid is because if you didn't, they would grow up to have obviously a lot of animosity towards your people and thus have a lot of motivation and even potentially the organizing power to resist your uprising. So, you know, essentially having the charity to not kill a child or not kill a person, you know, yes, it has a military disadvantage, but it's also an act of, you know, sympathy. You know, it's an act of humanity, you know, like just ruthlessly killing people is not the solution to these problems, right? And to be quite frank, we didn't kill fascism because fascism has always been around, you know, even, and it's always here. We didn't stamp out fascism, you know, it's still around. Like, what the fuck?
Colonial ethno-nationalist fascists are bad, and it's good to nuke them. That's my argument.
No.
If you're an anti-fascist, you should be happy that the fascists got bombed to hell.
No.
Now, I'm prepared to defend my argument from what I anticipate will be almost predictable responses.
Oh, yeah, really? Did you predict that somebody who actually lived in Hiroshima when they were 3 years old would be responding to your video? I highly doubt that.
Like, does a country's government and military being fascist justify killing perhaps upwards of 80,000 civilians? Well, firstly, I'll point out, the Japanese living and working in their homeland were not mere innocent bystanders.
Bro, the level of lack of nuance is killing me here.
The population of Japan did overwhelmingly support their expansionist, ethno-nationalist government and its aims.
That doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it okay. Like, it doesn't make it okay that, for example, like, let's look at right now, right? There is a large number of the population that supports the current regime in the United States, right? Even despite the damage that it's caused to our lives. Does that mean it's justified that, you know, people are struggling to pay for food or pay for basic resources? No, that doesn't justify anything just because they agree with it. Like, it's not like, this is not like a fucking slap on the hand kind of thing. That's not how this works. This is a very immature way to look at it.
Even more so than the German and Italian peoples supported their respective fascist leaders, which is really saying something.
Okay, so they were brainwashed. What's your fucking point? Like,
to whatever extent any truly anti-fascist Japanese civilians were killed by the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or for that matter, any of the conventional bombing that happened beforehand, then I would consider them casualties, not of the Allied...
What? No! Like... Yeah, okay. Obviously, they're casualties, right? First off, you don't consider the children and the disabled and the elderly and all of the other groups that were not actively, you know, pushing this campaign, like as casualties too. Hell, even the people who were fascists, you don't consider them casualties? Like, no, they're all, first off, they're all casualties, right? And second off, what a reckless disregard for life. Like, You may as well just say that, like, Japanese, you know, anti-fascists are expendable for a larger, you know, Western front, you know, because, like, what the fuck? Would you say that about, you know, fucking British anti-fascists if they got, like, fucking bombed to shit because Britain decided to go full fash? Like, would you still be saying that if they weren't, like, some sort of, like, foreign power? Like, that's my question.
War effort, but of the Japanese wartime government, which began the war in the first place. Furthermore, when I say the Japanese population, by and large, supported their government and its war goals, I don't just mean merely in the abstract or in theory. They supported it actively and materially.
Yeah, obviously, but I will say this, I'm not a World War II historian, but I would be very interested in knowing the structures of how the material production of Japanese, Japanese weapons and aircraft and all that was actually produced. Like, I would be very interested in knowing the semiotic flows that convinced people of this, and like what kind of assembled the machine that assembled the imperialist war machine. That, I think, would be a much better analysis than this fucking good or bad shit. Like, get this faciality machine out of my face.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki were selected to be bombed in such a manner because they were apt targets for attack. They weren't military fortifications or places with large garrisons per se, but they were each massive centers for military production.
Okay, that doesn't make it right. Like, you could have bombed it in a way that, didn't start, like, the fucking Cold War.
A majority of the people in each city were involved with industrial production for the Japanese war effort. They worked in munitions factories and vehicle assembly lines, that sort of thing.
That doesn't make it okay. Those people could learn that they were wrong. Like, sure.
The people in those cities directly served the Japanese war effort. Maybe not in the same way a soldier or an airman did, but they were the ones making the bullets and the bombs and the planes Japan fought the war with. The thing that made the emperor and most of his top brass realize the war was now unwinnable for them after the nukes dropped wasn't the loss of life, it was the loss of millions of potential man-hours of labor to support the war effort.
Well, no shit, but that doesn't make it okay. Like, it doesn't, that doesn't make it justified. Like, if you really want to go that angle, you don't have to drop a fucking nuke on them. You can do it other ways. Like, why does it have to be a nuke? Why does it have to be a weapon of mass destruction that by itself, can destroy an entire city that produced the arms race that defined the second half of the 20th century? Like, what the fuck are you on, bro?
The way I see it, if you're a fascist country, and one that chose to pick a fight with the rest of the world, you get what's coming to you.
Really? I mean, crying out loud, that's not even what happened for the first, the first half of these fascist nations' existences. Like, the fucking Allied powers did not give a flying fuck about what Japan was doing until they bombed Pearl Harbor. Like, they didn't get what was coming for them while they were going and doing, like, the rapes of Nanking and shit like that. Like, what are you fucking talking about?
And there isn't any need to feel sympathy for fascists and fascist sympathizers and supporters who get...
It's not fascist sympathizers to say that dropping the nuke was wrong. Like, no.
...turned into shadows in the war. Frankly, I unabashedly feel like the 24 or so Allied prisoners of war who were killed in the nuclear bombings.
Oh my god, you're not even having sympathy for the people who are on our fucking side who died. You're gonna call them casualties too? Let's watch.
Their deaths carry more moral weight than that of the 80,000 somewhat Japanese...
What the fuck? Okay, that's even worse. Wow, okay. What are you, like some kind of fucking utilitarian? Is that what this is?
These civilian steelworkers and munitions makers killed. I really mean...
I mean, all of those people could literally just learn that what they did was wrong and use their production to make a better world. I mean, that's kind of a naive outlook, just saying it right now, but, like, that is a possibility. Like, they could have just learned that they were wrong and, lived their lives with the guilt of, the damage that they did. And I know that Japan does a lot to suppress the history and violence of what they did in Imperial Japan. I know that's kind of it's a very shithead country in that respect, but that's not the problem of the people. That's not a problem of like that's not a problem that deserves to murder all of those people. I don't understand this fucking logic. Like, these people weren't soldiers, these people weren't on the front lines. Like, they were manufacturing shit, but, like, would you say the same thing about, like, bombing a Ford plant? Like, of course people are gonna die, it's war, but, like, there's so many things wrong with this. Oh my god. And I know that I'm not probably giving the most solid arguments. This is a reaction video. and I don't really want to spend, I'm already trying to write another script right now. I don't want to spend more time writing another script. So, I just kind of want to give my 2 cents on this, but yeah, fuck this guy.
No. I think the Imperial Japanese got off too lightly also.
What?
After the war, most of the
They literally got nuked.
fascist high command were allowed to kill themselves before the show trials could really begin.
Oh my god, who fucking cares? They died.
And Harry Truman even let Emperor Hirohito stay alive to keep the population from getting too rowdy about their loss. It might be a bit larpy to say, but
Yeah, that's pretty fucking larpy, dude, for a guy who's never apparently touched the ground of what Hiroshima is. Unlike me.
I were calling the shots, I would have told General MacArthur to behead the Emperor and everyone on his general staff on live TV the day the war ended.
Okay, so you are just as much of a warmonger as the fucking imperialist Japanese were. Like, what does that do to solve the problem? You're just continuing the cycle of violence.
I think that's a fitting consequence of leading a fascist nation into a war of aggression they're losing. But that might just be because I'm one of those radical lefties who thinks
You're not radical. Shut the fuck up.
fascism is bad. It's just a thought. Anyway, once again, my name's Card. If you might like to hear more from me, feel free to subscribe to this YouTube page, or just take a look at...
Alright, I'm gonna do a little boop. Alright,